ask people to come up with an image that symbolizes America's immigrant heritage and history, and many of them will choose the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty, also known as Lady Liberty, a gift from the people of France, has watched over New York's harbor since 1886. And on her base is a tablet inscribed with words penned by Emma Lazarus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. To some Americans, the words of Emma Lazarus are our national credo. Others say our national curse. What do you think? Credo? Curse? Both? Neither? We're going to discuss immigration in this video, a contentious topic that's getting a lot of attention in the last 2 years. Before I get into it, this is the Legal Code, and on this channel we discuss a wide range of legal topics to help you navigate this chaotic world that we're currently living in. So if you like that sort of things, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share with anyone else you think will find value. I'm a real life attorney, so I have insight into all of these topics that we discuss in this video. So hopefully you enjoy and then you learn something. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's discuss America's controversial immigration policy. What is it exactly? And why are we in this mess? The topic of immigration in the US has always been a fraught subject in America. We all know this, except for the indigenous people, the Native Americans. At some previous point, all of the rest of us made the long journey to America from somewhere else. In the last 400 years, Europeans, Africans, Asians, Latinos have built up the continent to the tune of 334 million people. The liberals and the Democrats like to say, we all came here from somewhere else. We were all once immigrants. But their opponents reply that that was then, this is now. Acknowledging the fact doesn't mean we can't have honest concerns about how much immigration is now impacting the nation and what is enough and at what pace should we allow foreigners to come into the United States. As of 2023 begins, this crisis, a geopolitical crisis, a humanitarian crisis, an economic crisis pervades at the southern border. Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California all report challenging socio-economic pressures from the numbers gathered at the border or huddled just inside at border towns like El Paso, Texas. The governors of Florida and Texas seem to regard what is happening as a five-alarm fire, who know that the impractical and nonsensical immigration reform will never find its way to Congress. And so what we're seeing is a blame game, name calling, incendiary rhetoric, but actual reform seems exceedingly unlikely, and frustration among Americans who feel like their country has abandoned them. Much of the problem at the border is that the United States does not have a coherent, consistent, and defensible immigration policy. That's just ground zero. Enforcement varies according to the level and public alarm and depending on which party or even which president is in power. And so instead of enacting a comprehensive immigration reform, the two parties settle for a war, a turf war of words and rhetoric and mutual recriminalization of one another, thus forcing each president, each administration to fill the vacuum with executive orders and executive interpretation or on existing statutes. The result for those individuals who are hanging on for hope, for aid, is that the political journey that determines their fate is just as arduous and uncertain as the journey to the United States. Every immigration scholar, from the bleeding hearts to those staunchly opposing to those crossing, all agree that if the United States had a consistent, comprehensible set of policies, at least potential immigrants would know what to expect and what they were up against. In the absence of any standardization or any humane and understandable policy, potential immigrants get themselves to the US and hope that somehow, some way, they will eventually get in, and once in, will be given something. One option would be to grandfather in the estimated 11.5 million undocumented immigrants, increasing the numbers of legal immigrants per year permitted to become legalized, and clearing the backlog of immigration cases, including asylum cases, and finding some combination of electric and perhaps physical barriers to prevent the crossing. Now, "Give me you're tired," the most famous lines, have never really represented an American consensus. In a sense, they do give a false hope to the tempest lost, the tired, and the poor of the world, because at no time in United States 250-year history has the United States opened its doors to those who wish to come. In fact, the history of the United States is the history of periodic attempts to close the proverbial golden door. Most US policies have not been on board with the poem's invitation for the rest of the world. It's sort of like a cultural misnomer. As attractive and welcoming as the statement is, it's never been so. Unfortunately, though, anyone reading it, foreigners reading it and thinking that it actually reflects American values and the American immigration policy and philosophy, is very, very much in for a rude awakening. Some argue that we should either leave it up, the ideals of the new Colossus, or remove the plaque from the pediment of the Statue of Liberty. Because to pitch our nation's promise so high and then to refuse to live by that promise brands the American people as hypocrites. Even in 2019, President Trump, acting director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, offered a revision of the poem that said, "Give me your tired and your poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge." The paradox about immigration, American immigration's policy, was set early though. As African slaves were welcomed because they arrived by force in chains, beaten to work for free, and enrich the American heritage. And America was successful in getting their pound of flesh from 300 years of servitude and making America prosperous and wealthy. Africans were regarded as cargo, or 3/5 of a human being, once they landed on American territory. So that was probably the only historical and example of American immigration policy being that gratuitous and welcoming. Then the Irish came. The Irish, who came in waves in the 18th century, fleeing Ireland, who were under foreign occupation and a caste system that regarded them as less than human, as the lowest form of humanity. They were denounced by those in power as lazy, drunken, self-pitying, dirty, reckless. The Irish came to US for a new opportunity, a land of opportunity. They found a very different form of social hierarchy, one that was based on the color of a person's skin. Noel Ignatiev's 1995 book tells the story of how the oppressed became the oppressors, meaning the Irish, how the new Irish immigrants achieved acceptance among an initially hostile population only by providing that they become more brutal than their oppression of the African Americans than the natives were. The book, titled How the Irish Became White Again, shows that the Irish were able to mobilize and elevate socially only by participating in the oppression of the class automatically put on the lowest rank of the urban ladder, the black slaves and the black workers. Whether slave or free man, the Irish hated, despised, and persecuted blacks. And in the cauldron of the racial antagonism, the Irish working class was bleached white again in the eyes of the ruling class. Then it was the Chinese, who built our transcontinental railroads, but whose numbers were eventually curtailed by the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Then came the Japanese, who, among others, served to help James J. Hill build the Great Northern Railroad. Faced with growing anti-Japanese sentiment in America, particularly in California, President Theodore Roosevelt negotiated the Gentleman's Agreement of 1907, in which Japan agrees to sharply restrict the number of its people that will land on American shores that Japan would send to the United States. Then it was the Italians and the Eastern Europeans, and of course the Jewish people from Eastern European countries. In our more recent past, Mexicans, immigrants from Guatemala, El Salvador, Venezuelan, Nicaragua, the Puerto Ricans, then the Cubans, the Hmong from Cambodia, the Somalis, the Muslims. Remember, former Trump actually wanted to call the the Muslim ban during his 2015-2016 campaign. So the pattern repeats itself with predictability. With each new wave, some percentage of the American, the old guard, derides and dehumanizes the latest immigrants, regarding them as an economic threat or a security threat, sometimes even a hygiene threat. They complain that the latest immigrants group only keeps to themselves, they refuse to learn English, they drain public resources that should be reserved and earmarked for only American citizens, and that they are all criminals that come here. There is often a racial dynamic too in anti-immigrant politics. The alarmists warn us in code about the replacement of our own with aliens. At their most intense rallies, they carry placards that says, "These people," whatever, fill in, whoever, "will never replace us." And throughout our history, there have been those who would slam the door shut. Now that we're in, no one else is allowed, and admit no further immigrants, even if these are their brothers and sisters, or advise that they should come in the legal way, like everyone else. President Trump actually said many times during the course of the administration that immigrants should turn back at the border because we're all full. No one else should be admitted. Others in our history have been willing to permit a modest number of immigrants in as long as they were white. Some are open to a significant but strictly calibrated number of immigrants. Some just want a moratorium so we can absorb those who are here. A solid majority of Americans have no beef with legal immigration also, but just want a secure border with strict enforcement, and they resent those who break the law to get in. If your first act on American soil is to break the law, they say, this does not bode well for your character or your likely behavior once in. And also there's the libertarians who argue for something like open borders, reckoning that the market will sort things out somehow. But is that necessarily true? So as you can see, there are many opinions regarding this, but most of the confusion and controversy has to deal with there not being any sound, comprehensive, understandable immigration policy. And so when unfortunately immigrants make the dangerous trek to the American shore, the American border, they're met with something that I don't think they expected. And so it's a controversial, it's a humanitarian crisis. Cities, mayors, governors are going up against one another as to what to do. Who should bear the brunt of this? Taxpayers are frustrated, thinking that the government is helping immigrants who are not citizens and forsaking American citizens. So this has a lot of opinions around it. And I thought it was important to discuss. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section regarding immigration policy in the United States. What do you think is a sound and reasonable solution? A humane solution, because these are human beings after all. What do you think? Do you think America should let everyone in, whoever comes? Do you have the right to seek asylum in the United States? Or do you think there should be a limit as to how many people could come in? All comments are welcome. This is a contentious topic, and I want to know what you think, because it affects all of us. So everyone should have an opinion about it. And with that, I leave you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.